What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Happy Hour Hoops, the Triple H podcast. We got you covered on everything NBA all the time. Guys, I just cracked a Shipyard pumpkin beer. That means it's
Pumpkin.
almost
Oh,
October.
Dunny.
That means it's almost October. That means the
Oh no.
NBA season is almost here. Jake, we have basketball in less than 1 month. Today we got the Eastern Conference. I mean, is this excitement for basketball season or what?
Oh man. It started like hitting yesterday, I think, with media days. You see the guys in the jerseys
Yeah.
coming out. And it's just like, oh shit, like the season comes up. And it's like football has such a long off season. Like you have like random practices in June and August, and then there's a long training camp. Like basketball training camp is like 2 weeks. They just come, try to whip them into shape quick, and then you're off and running. So it's really like right around the corner. I think we got exactly 3 weeks until opening night now, or a month or whatever, however long it is. It's October 19th, that Tuesday night. So it's right around the corner. So yeah, we're gonna get locked in with the East today, starting out with the champions will get the advantage here. And it's an interesting, we kind of touched on it last episode about how the East looks just as tough as the West this year. In the past years, the West has been, I mean, a dominant conference, a much deeper conference, had a much better record against the East. I mean, that 1 year Phoenix had like 49 wins and missed the playoffs. Like that would never happen in the Eastern Conference of late. But so Dunny, take us away here. Our first contender, we got to start with the champs, right?
Yeah, the Milwaukee Bucks. I mean, just they have a lot of the same returning guys. They really kind of shocked the world last year, and Giannis proved all the doubters wrong, even after, some questioned their moves in the offseason with trading away a lot of the future for guys like Drew Holiday. Giannis signed the max that people thought they didn't put enough guys around them or around Giannis. And, turns out all those things weren't really true. They had a great supporting cast. Drew Holiday was worth, everything they gave up for the guy. And Chris Middleton really played the best basketball of his career. So, there's no reason to doubt that the Milwaukee Bucks can't go back. Obviously, I think it's going to be a lot tougher this year. You're going to see a healthy Brooklyn Nets. We were talking last week about how improved this Eastern Conference is. So, not going to be a cakewalk, but Milwaukee, they have to be at least in the favorite discussion to do it again next year.
Yeah, and sometimes these teams they hit a stride and find their identity, and that's when they really can have like the impact we've seen some of these title teams have. That we've seen a bunch of teams go back to back the last couple of years. I mean, we go to the Warriors, we go to the Heat, and after they got that first taste of the title, that second year, and it's pretty much the same group coming back in Milwaukee. I mean, they've got Drew Holiday's obviously locked up there for a good amount of time. So is Chris Middleton. That's the core they really have. They get out PJ Tucker, Bryn Forbes, and Sam Merrill out there as well. Lose Jeff Teague as well, but they reload. George Hill's back. Rodney Hood's a good shooter. Our favorite basketball player, I think, between me and you, Semi Ojeleye, whatever he's gonna do. And Grayson
He's the
Allen
Giannis stopper,
too.
Dude. They just wanted to have the Giannis stopper on their team.
They're
just eliminate anyone else from having him.
They're picking his brain, bro. They're like, yeah, how did you do this? Like, we got to figure out how these teams, how we can defend it. But yeah, I think that there's nothing really that's changed between this Bucks team in the last couple of years. They lost to, the Eastern Conference champions in both playoff runs before this year, losing to, they lose to Miami in the second round in the bubble season, lose to Toronto in the conference finals. So it's not like they haven't been around. They just finally broke through. So I think this year, next year, the year after, as long as this team is together and they're healthy, they're going to be at the top of the East for years to come, because Giannis isn't going anywhere. Like, he's got a lot of years left, a lot of tread, and probably is the most confident he's ever been in himself, which is
Yeah.
absolutely terrifying for the rest of the league.
Yeah, I think something that's huge, a returning player and someone who a lot of people thought was going to be gone. I mean, he was gone with some of the contract offers he was getting, was Bobby Portis. And getting a guy like him back on the squad for a team friendly deal, I think is going to be huge. And maybe, there's people out there that know that Giannis and Milwaukee Bucks won the championship, but they don't even know who Bobby Portis is. But obviously, the true hoop fans, people who watch the league closely, they
Love Bobby
know,
Hortus.
yeah, they love, his crazy big eyes and his, just
It's
crazy
crazy.
behavior and just the type of fire he plays with. I mean, he reminds you like a guy like Kevin Durant or Kevin Garnett, Dennis Rodman. Like he has that fire in him. He's a guy that every championship team needs, and they have him returning also. So I think Bobby Portis is a big part of this Milwaukee Bucks team.
That's right.
Bobby
I think
Portis
that
stands absolutely.
we'll take that. We'll take that. So yeah, I mean, there's not much to say new about the Milwaukee Bucks. They're a known
Grayson
commodity.
Allen too.
They're coming back. Yeah, Grayson Allen, man. He's gonna hit some game winners for them. And DiVincenzo also didn't play that whole playoff run. He's a very important piece and is gonna look good. So now we have to talk about the Brooklyn Nets. We don't know what to expect with the Brooklyn Nets at the moment. Kyrie Irving we'll talk about, there's a couple guys that we have to mention, potentially can't play in half the home games this year. Unknown, his vaccination status unknown, but New York City and other cities around the country, you can't go to indoor events. So as of right now, that is the knowledge we have. So taking that with a grain of salt, that's why when I was putting these rankings together, as much as I love the idea of the Brooklyn Nets, only losing by Kevin Durant's big toe to the team we just hyped up and basically said is going to run through the league. We just don't know what this team is going to look like. There's already drama around it. We don't have to get deep into Kyrie's drama. There's a great Rolling Stone article that outlines it as well. So go search that out. But with his status up in the air for the season, can they match up to Milwaukee? And is there enough firepower around? Because really this team is reloaded and should be going away favorites. I believe they're the betting favorites right now. But it was just a strange day in Brooklyn Nets land yesterday. So I don't know. I didn't know how you felt coming out of media day and everything going on, and what your opinion is now as a contender for the Nets too.
Yeah, so I basically indulged in the Brooklyn Nets media day in like three different parts. So first thing in the morning, the first thing I took away was I saw the clip of was it David Letterman with
Yes, yes,
with
bro.
Kevin
That
Durant?
was
Okay.
like what was going on. That was the most. I think my whole day was thrown off.
I don't
Because
know
I
if he
saw
was
that.
like trying to be funny and just like completely missed or what, but for those who don't know what I'm talking about, David Letterman asked Kevin Durant at Brooklyn Nets media day. He was there, so we spoke that Kyrie Irving wasn't. Kevin Durant was there. He got asked, Kevin, and then he said, "May I call you KD? Why do people call you KD?" And like completely serious, waiting for Kevin Durant's response. Kevin Durant says, "Well, my first name's Kevin, that starts with a K, and my last name's Durant, and that starts with a D, so KD." And then Letterman goes, "Oh, okay, KD." And then like asked him like how ready he was or how much percent like effort he was going to put in the rest of the
Yeah,
season, which is also a dumb question. Like what player is going to say below 100%, especially a guy like Kevin Durant, who in my opinion is the best player in basketball right now. It was just shocking. And that's how I started Brooklyn Nets Media Day. Then I see the Kyrie Irving stuff. And then, of course, the third part that I alluded to was Stephen A. Smith just absolutely losing his mind about Kyrie's comments about the vaccine and him not being with the team now, but he will be. Stephen A., of course, jumping to conclusions saying the Brooklyn Nets should trade him now. He also said that about Andrew Wiggins. So it was kind of crazy, a lot to digest. One of the most bizarre and just dumb questions I've ever heard asked to a superstar. The Kyrie drama, and then Stephen A. saying that Kyrie should be traded from the Brooklyn Nets, which I guess is an option for them if they don't like the way that he's behaving about this, and if they're not going to have him for 50% of their games, then maybe that is an option. But just a lot going on with the Brooklyn Nets right now.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot going on, and it's not a lot about basketball at all. That's the unfortunate reality is our media day. Like if we could have discussed a media day thing and done this instead of the East previews, but then we would just be talking like this would be a vaccine podcast. And
seriously,
like do what you need to do. But that's not what you want going into an NBA season, like everybody, I think the NBA in itself has a problem with talking too much about like the drama around the NBA. Like Twitter is really bad about that too. And I think we see that all the time. Like, but as much as anything I just want it to not be focused on some off court nonsense that's political or not political or anything coming into an NBA season. We haven't had that in the last couple of years.
No.
So it's just crazy times in the league right now. But going forward, this Brooklyn Nets team, I think, is at its most highest potential that they have. I mean, how many games do you realistically think they can win? Because their offense has shown that if all three of these guys are on the court, it's just too much. It's just there's too much shot creation. They add Patty Mills, who is just an incredible, the perfect vet 6-man point guard. I feel like in the league right now is Patty Mills. Yeah. He just fills that role perfectly. He's not gonna have to do a lot. Blake Griffin coming back and looked great. I mean, who are you looking to make make an impact on this Nets team? Because they've got some guys that they have a good roster around these guys too.
Yeah, it's crazy. We're talking about, the possibility of Kyrie Irving not being there for half the games, or, if that Stephen A situation happens and he gets traded. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to be worried about the Brooklyn Nets if that's the case. Like, if this team has Kyrie Irving or not, obviously they're much better with him. But like you just mentioned, Patty Mills could start for this team and they would still be unbelievable. They would probably still be the favorite of the Eastern Conference. Like, this is, I see people talking about this daily on social media, but this legitimately, the Brooklyn Nets roster they have assembled for this upcoming season could be the best team of all time. And, that's obviously, I'm not talking like Dream Team, like Team USA, like NBA roster going into a legit real season. I mean, you talk about them getting LaMarcus Aldridge back. They have Blake Griffin still, Patty Mills, Paul Millsap is there. And then one of the co-MVPs in the Summer League, their rookie, Cameron Thomas, who just absolutely put on a show and was scoring just like crazy. So, I mean, if you don't have a Kyrie Irving, they have point guard depth, obviously. They have the best player in the world, like I said, Kevin Durant, in my opinion. They have the best scorer in the NBA right now in James Harden. So, it's they're scary. I think, you ask how many wins they can get this season. If there's no load management or serious injuries to Harden or Durant or Kyrie, if he's there, I think they could be up there with that Warriors team from a few years ago and be in the 70 range for wins. I really do.
I see. Like, I don't think that's too out of the question with them, because they're just so they're so top heavy, but that if it works out, they got like the worst luck of health last year. So if they catch the breaks this year and the guys are on the court all together, they could go on some crazy runs against the bad teams in the East and the West. Like, we get down to when we're talking about teams later on at the end of this podcast, like, is Cleveland going to give the Nets playing their best a battle? Like, some of these nights, like Detroit, like some of these nights is just going to be overpowering. And that's a bad example because Cleveland actually beat the Nets back to back early on in the season last year. So now they're probably going to do the same thing. But you know what I mean? Like, this.
No, yeah.
You look at it. the way that we've seen them together when all three of them are actually on the court, it's been so little amount of time, but they've been so dominant that you just can't help but wonder what it looks like for even a 2-month stretch. Like, just let me see 2 months, and do they go 20-2? Like, do they have that kind of run? I think that they do, and I don't think that that's too out of the question.
Yeah, I saw it. I saw it up close and personal in the playoffs, dude, against my Boston Celtics, and that was enough for me to know that when those three guys are healthy together, there's really little to nothing that you can do. I mean, there was games in the Celtics Nets series where Marcus was hitting shots that he never hits. Jason Tatum was playing the best basketball of his career, and there was still games where it just wasn't even close because those three guys are so good. They had such a good supporting cast, and now, if you ask me, their roster is for sure better than last year, in my opinion. So, Brooklyn, I mean, there's a reason we're talking about them right now. Yes, as we know, they come with all the drama, having guys like Kyrie Irving and James Harden, who's been quiet since he got to Brooklyn.
He did enough to get there, so now it's fully on Kyrie at this point.
And I think Durant's way past drama, as far as his career goes. So
I just don't. I think Kyrie's a loose cannon at this point, bro. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like he could do anything. He could do anything. I know he is. I know. I'm not saying like I just found this out, but I always give him the benefit of the doubt, and that's where and then it just every time he just trips right over that, and I'm just like, I don't know.
Finds a new way to amaze us.
Because I've come out here and defended him a lot of times, and he's just like, he could retire tomorrow. Like, I feel like that is the biggest, as much of a possibility
I thought he was
traded is him retiring.
I thought he was going to last season. So yeah, and I could definitely see it happening this season.
So we'll see.
But I mean, we're in agreement though. If Kyrie Irving's not on this team, I mean, we're still talking about them second right now in the East, correct?
Yeah, I still think they might even be title favorites with just Kevin Durant and James Harden.
Second, as in like we gave the nod to talking about the Bucks first because they won the championship. I just mean as far as this podcast goes, Kyrie Irving on this team or not, we'd be talking about the Brooklyn Nets in the contender section.
Regardless, if you're Kevin Durant on your team, you're a contender. I think we could have just cut right to that at the beginning and been like, yep, that's it. But yeah, we're aligned here. But let's get into the team you were just talking about, the team in your background. I see it under that little basketball hoop there. The Boston Celtics.
Everywhere.
We don't have them categorized as a straight contender right now. We have them in an almost contender, close to a contender. And I started writing out my thoughts about the Celtics and everything. And the first thing I wrote was like, it seemed like a relatively quiet summer in Boston, except when you realize the GM of 17 years stepped down. The head coach now runs the organization. It's a brand new head coach, and the starting point guard is gone. But other than that, pretty basic summer, right? But it really feels like that because the infrastructure is still there, right? Like, Stevens is still there, and you can still see his handprints all over this team. Al Horford's back. You just got like, it just feels like even with all the changes that we're kind of with the same structure and everything. And that's a bet that, I don't know, I feel pretty good about going into this season, but I want to hear from you, pure whatever you have thought, what your expectations are coming into the season.
Yeah, the more things change, the more they stay the same, huh? And that is what we have with my Boston Celtics this year. Like you mentioned, Steven's still around. You have the pillars of this team are still the same. I mean, Jaylen Brown didn't go anywhere. Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart, the most notably too, Marcus Smart and Jaylen Brown. Like, these guys who, all from the second half of last season on through the summer, I heard weekly about how, Jaylen Brown could be traded for this guy. Marcus Smart's gone. He's going to sign elsewhere. He's going to go to a real contender because Boston isn't that. But we're back here. We're, about to start the next season, and those two guys are still in Boston. They have a new identity though. And I think that is what is going to be the biggest difference from last year, from any years previous with the Boston Celtics under Brad Stevens. I think maybe he even knew that he wasn't, the right guy for this coaching job. I think the players were starting to get to that point, but they never came out and said it because they had the utmost respect for Brad. I think most people on the team are probably glad that Brad's still in the building. I think everyone's excited about their new coach. You even had guys like Ennis Cantor, saying at media day why he was returning to Boston is because when he was on his team a few years ago, they thought they were ready for a championship, and they kind of promised that to the fans. So he was like, I came back to Boston to do that, and I think being on this team with these guys, I have a good shot at it. I mean, that's, not word for word what he said, but that's kind of Ennis Cantor's thoughts. I know that's why Al came back. He loved Boston. They re-signed Robert Williams, who has more blocked shots than missed shots in his career.
Wow, that's a great stat. I love that poll.
I mean, that's when anyone tries to fight me on Rob's money that he just got this offseason, I hit them with that real quick. But yeah, I really think the Celtics have a chance to be a top 5 defense in this league this year. I mean, we saw the flashes of Tatum at the end of last year. People like to troll the Celtics for, their poor performance in the playoffs. They didn't have their second best player in Jaylen Brown, who improves every game that he plays. So, and they had some notable pieces come in. I mean, Dennis Schroeder, getting him. We mentioned Al, of course. Bruno Fernando, I think, will be an important piece. Herman Gomez from the Grizzlies and Josh Richardson from the Mavericks, who, again, I think he fits the identity perfect of, trying to be more defensive, grind team, a team that plays fast in your face basketball. New coach represents that. The new additions to the team represents that. I think, I'm not saying we have them in this category for a reason, the oh so close to contenders, because that's what they are right now. Until they prove it, they're just close to that. I don't think they're a legit contender right now, but, a few months from now, if they're in the conversation, I won't be surprised.
I think that when you have a player like Jason Tatum and a player that Jaylen Brown has turned out to be, I think that is what people just because no one, my problem with projections coming into any sport, any season before the season preview, and it's something that I try when we talk about these things to look to, is you can't project anything on a season, right? Like basketball seasons are chaotic. You don't know how people are going to develop during the year, who's going to be improved, who isn't, blah, 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 all those factors. But you kind of have to at least take a guess, right? Like you got to put some faith, and everybody always just no, we'll just stick to last year's results, blah, blah, blah. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
There's more of that than ever in basketball. Why are we not thinking that Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are going to be better than they were last year? With everything
they get better every year.
They get better every year, and they're both 24 and 23. Or Jason Tatum's 19 still, I'm pretty sure. So they've got lots of time left. To develop. They're not even in their prime yet. And right now they are two of the best two-way wings in the league. The guys that you hear everybody saying, those are the people you need, are two-way wings, scoring wings, defensive-minded wings. It's why the Warriors just picked Moses Moody and Jonathan Kuminga with their 2 top picks. It's, it's everything to have those 2 guys. And the Celtics literally have those 2 guys on their roster right now. And so if they keep getting exponentially better like they have been, Tatum's going to be an MVP candidate and Jaylen Brown's going to be an All-NBA candidate. And that team is going to win a lot of games and be in positions to win important games in the playoffs. I just think that we aren't, especially looking at the other people that we're going to talk about after, Philly, Atlanta and Miami and those types of teams. Those teams have a lot more question marks, I think, than the Celtics do coming into this year. A lot more question marks. The Celtics, we know that was my original thing. This is the infrastructure. We know what we're getting from the Celtics team, except maybe it's a little better offense, because we both know that Brad's offense has got stale all the time during those seasons. And maybe Ime can bring out a different type of ball movement with this team that they haven't seen before, and that more free-flowing type of play. And maybe Marcus Smart is that playmaker that everybody's been talking him up to be. I think he is. He played point guard. He got drafted in the league because he was an incredible point guard at Oklahoma State. Like, it's not like he never handled the ball. I don't know. Like, this is we're just gonna sound like the pro Celtics podcast, and I'm like all hyping him up, but I just
I'm
don't
for that.
understand. Yeah, well, I'm not against it either because I just don't understand why they're not getting more talk to be like one of those breakthrough teams in the East, because
I'll
honestly,
take
they're
it.
the surest thing out of the other two.
Yeah, I'll take the, lack of recognition right now. I kind of think I needed just the amount.
You need the hate.
Yeah, they've just been getting hosed so bad by the media the last few seasons. Losing Kyrie Irving, like as if that was our fault or Boston really had a choice. I mean, he left, and then you get Kemba Walker, who I mean, I loved Kemba. I
He's
thought
just
he was
hurt. He
great.
just
I was
couldn't stay
happy, but
healthy.
it didn't work out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just, a lot of things didn't go the Celtics ways the last few years. Yes, they had all the talent. Gordon Hayward, I mean, everyone knows that story, how that went. It was,
They were
horrible
cursed.
thing.
We should have known they were cursed from that moment. Like that second you saw that, was like, this can't possibly go well for them in the next couple of years.
I also like that you say the thing about, Brad's offense kind of being stale. And I think the reality that is Brad is really good at getting the best out of people who are overlooked by others and are seen as underperformers because you think about that Isaiah Thomas, Avery Bradley, Jay Crowder, Amir Johnson group. I mean, the Celtics were playoff teams. Like Isaiah Thomas was in the MVP race in those years. And those are the type of gritty guys that Brad coached well. And then I think Brad kind of got two superstars that fell in his lap. And I'll say it. I think he didn't really know how to coach him as well as someone else might be able to. I think with a new defensive kind of identity, and it seems like Ime is going to allow Jalen and Jason to really just take over this team. I think that's what they need, and that's what the surrounding cast need. I mean, allow your superstars to be your superstars, and then just see where it goes.
Yeah, I'm just very bullish on this team and just those two players in general. And when you have those kind of two guys, like you said, like you just see where it goes, and that they seem like that's where we're heading with this team. And I think that can only mean good things going into the future. Especially, we've talked about the other two teams, like the two other teams we talked about, Brooklyn and Milwaukee. They're the class of the East. They're probably the class of the league, honestly, because when we talk about the West next week, I mean, I think like the Lakers are probably at the top of both of our lists, but the rest of the teams don't match up in the West to Brooklyn or Milwaukee. And so the Celtics have a chance to be right up there in that top 5 range all year round. And when we're talking about title contenders, if it all clicks together. So let's get into the other 3 teams that we have in our close to title contenders category. I guess I want to touch on the Sixers here, but we've talked about Ben Simmons so much the last couple of weeks that I don't think we really need to go deep into the Sixers. Like if the Ben Simmons trade is still looming, and we really don't know what this team looks like without Ben Simmons or whatever they get back from Ben Simmons. So it's hard to kind of project. They have Joel Embiid. I think they're still going to be good, but we just need to see what happens with that saga, and we've touched on it extensively. So I think the next thing is really the Atlanta Hawks are a team that I was surprised to write down, honestly, when I was putting this together earlier. I was like, I kind of thinking about Atlanta and didn't even really hesitate. They're in this 5th slot here after the Celtics and the Sixers. But they kind of have to be mentioned here, right? Like this team is deep. We learned how deep this team truly was in the playoffs and how loaded they are throughout their lineup and how those guys perform. They don't really lose a lot. Tony Snell really and Chris Dunn obviously is off that roster, but they pretty much keep the whole team from last year, re-sign John Collins. He's there for the long run. And what they showed is how versatile they can be in the playoffs and just a nightmare matchup for some of those teams. Obviously the Sixers had a kind of pretty much a collapse, but it still led way to the Hawks getting to the Eastern Conference Finals where no one thought they were going to be. So I don't know. What do you think what are you expecting from the Hawks this year? And do you think that it's replicable last year? Or are they a team on the rise? Are this is kind of the team that they can peak out at as like a 4 or 5 seed that maybe can win a couple rounds but isn't a true contender?
Yeah, I'd say to me, this season for the Atlanta Hawks, last season is probably their ceiling. And I don't say that with any disrespect to them or to what they're building or how talented they are. I just think, I mean, we've mentioned it a couple times. The Eastern Conference is going to be tougher this year. The Bucks got slightly better, in my opinion. The Brooklyn Nets are better, and they're going to be healthy. You mentioned the Celtics are looking better. Philly is really the only team in this conversation that's looking worse.
Philly's definitely worse next year, no matter what. They're not getting a
Yeah,
superstar for Simmons. I think that that's like the main point is that we know that they're not going to be. There's no way that they're going to be as cohesive. They don't even know who the fuck's going to be on this team in like 3
yeah.
weeks. So yeah, keep going. Sorry.
No, and the thing about the Atlanta Hawks too is like, I mean, Trae Young was like visibly getting better every series in the playoffs last year, and I think
Yeah.
that's the case for most of their roster. I mean, Clint Capella is not really like a young guy, but he was just meshing all year and really getting to know new teammates in Atlanta. And John Collins has signed his extension, which I think he just wanted. John Collins to me was a guy who was in trade talks for years, and that might have frustrated him, and he probably just wanted to get paid. I think he liked it in Atlanta. He wanted to stay with Trae Young. That finally happens. Cam Reddish was banged up in the playoffs last year, who's another young, very talented player. They'll have him. And then, I think a lot Kevin Herter on this team, like they just
Mhm.
have the piece. I mean, you
Just
you
weapons.
touched
There's
on
just
the
weapons
depth. Yeah.
everywhere.
They have
Yeah.
depth, like you said, at the top of this. They brought in Gorgie Dang and Jalil Okafor, so they have even more depth at the center position, the five,
Yeah.
because we know Capella grinds and plays hard all game, so that's important.
Well, they still have I don't remember the guy's name, but the kid from USC that was a first round pick
Oh,
from last year too, Ngonku or Gonku or something like that. I'm gonna look up the
yes.
pronunciation, but you know who I was talking about.
Yep.
Um,
Yep. So
and
yeah, they have a great deal of big man depth then. And they lost Bruno Fernando is really the only big they lost, and they didn't play him much anyway. He's on the Celtics, as we are just talking about. So yeah, I mean, Atlanta Hawks, I think Eastern Conference Finals is probably their ceiling, and I think that's fair because that's where they made it last year. I'm not going to sit here and say that I think the Atlanta Hawks are going to make the finals this year. I It's possible. It's a possibility. They're really talented. They're going to go as far as Trae Young will take them. And he had insane numbers last year. And I honestly think Trae Young's an underrated point guard in this league.
yeah, and he's
Um,
getting better too.
yeah, I mean, expect him to do big things again. Expect the first Trae Young in MSG game to be crazy this year. That's going to be very exciting. Knicks Hawks, I think that's like a mini rivalry that came from the playoffs last year.
Oh,
The
definitely.
Atlanta Hawks are fun. They're a good team. Eastern
Did
Conference
you
Finals,
see?
I could see it. Finals, I couldn't.
Did you see Trae Young at showing up at Friday Night SmackDown when it was at the Garden?
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh my
that's how you
God, that
know.
was ridiculous.
That's how you know that he is one of the biggest villains in New York. When WWE brings him out, he got kicked out too. Kicked out from ringside. That was a great moment for the crowd there. Yeah, this dude is he's always had the confidence in himself. I think we've known that since before when he was coming out. And last year just really I think proved a lot of people that they could win with him. I think last year was some weird circumstances, regardless. But this team is kind of built perfectly to maximize what Trae Young can do. And I think that
Mhm.
the thing that interests me the most about them as being a potential because I'm with you, like I think they can get to the conference finals again. I think they could beat somebody on the way to the conference finals. Um, but I just them winning a title or them eventually getting past the Milwaukee or Brooklyn, it's their defensive side of the ball that you need to see. And Trae obviously is not a plus defender. Bogdanovich is not a plus defender. somebody they missed a lot last year in that playoff series was DeAndre Hunter, who is a great player,
It's another guy I
and
forgot to
a
mention.
great
Yeah.
a great defender. So hopefully he's back this year, and he was playing great before he got hurt too. Um, and so with him and Collins as the front court or as the wings there, and Capella is one. I mean, Capella's one of the best defensive centers in the league. People, I think when he got his contract, he kind of like flipped on the scale to like people were just like out on Capella for a little bit, but he's good. Like he's very good at what he does on the court. Obviously, he has some defensive limitations when it comes to when the floor gets spread and everything. But listen, not every center in the league is going to be able to guard 5 out. And it doesn't mean that they're not effective. I think, we love the spacing. We love the 3-point spacing for centers and small ball and everything, but there's still a place in this league, even with those kinds of deficiencies, for guys like Clint Capella. And I think that he's done a very good job in his role. So this team is solid all the way through, and they're young too. So they could be another thing with like the Celtics, like they could just be on the rise and these guys are growing together and they're just going to become a force. I wouldn't really necessarily be surprised by that, but I don't think they're in as good of a place as the Celtics are, just because it's Trey as a smaller point guard compared to 2 outstanding wings with size and defending. So how good can the Hawks be defensively against these teams?
I agree.
Yeah. So,
so are we going to get into Philly? We will try to keep the Ben Simmons stuff to a minimum, but I mean,
I don't know what else we can say about Philly, though.
It is tough to break it down right now because they're just a huge question mark in the East. I think with still just having Tobias, Embiid, Thibault, I mean, they're still going to be good. You hope there's going to be something, another piece, at least a point guard with them after this whole Ben Simmons drama ends. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it is really tough to preview them and to even try to assume what they will be this year.
It is, because I want to see what pieces are going to actually be on the floor. I think with Embiid, they're going to be solid no matter what, but I think that they fall more into this range of the 4 to 6 seed than the top 3 in the East, just because of the unknowns right now. So let's get into a couple rapid fires here. We have the Miami Heat are in this kind of almost contender category, but I don't know. How do you feel about the Heat, Quick? Because
do
you think that they're a contender?
So I have something, a quick thought about the Heat. I think the Miami Heat could, in my eyes, be a contender this year.
Okay.
However, I think they legitimately have a year, maybe 2 years to make it happen, because after that I don't see it. I think, I don't want to doubt the guy. I think Jimmy Butler's awesome. I think Kyle Lowry's awesome. I think they're going to be a great duo. I think they both play super hard, and that they just play a tough brand of basketball, and that's why they have made a living in this league for so long, because neither of them are blowing you away with their athleticism or just gifted talents. They're grinders. They defend. They have a high IQ. They play basketball hard. They have their whole career. But I think soon enough, and Kyle Lowry first, these guys are going to start to decline. And then you just have a weird mix of older veterans who can't get it, done as well as they used to. And then an emergence of a young center like Bam Adebayo. And then you have young wings and Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero, who, they're not young superstars. They're young, good role players right now. So I don't know. I think if it's going to be a time for the Miami Heat with this group, I think it's going to be right now.
I'm in full agreement with you. I think that that's what makes them so hard for me to think of them as like a true contender, because it all kind of has to go right. And we're counting on 2 guys with a lot of miles on them to play at like superstar levels. I mean, really, like, do we think of Kyle Lowry or Jimmy Butler on the same level as some of the guys we talked about earlier? I guess we'll see. I wouldn't put it, and that's the thing is like, Jimmy Butler, like we know
Yeah, I
how
was gonna
Jimmy
say
Butler is
Jimmy,
wired.
like
We know how these
he
guys are
like
wired.
is. Yeah.
Yes. But Jimmy, that's also going to lead to a point where Jimmy doesn't have it anymore and still thinks he has it. And that's coming sooner than later.
Yeah, let me ask you if this is a biased thought. Do you think Jason Tatum's better than Jimmy Butler, right?
Yes.
Or am I okay? I feel like
I may or may not have money on Jason Tatum and Luka Doncic for MVP this year, and we'll get into that in a couple weeks. Yeah, but that may or may not. It's rumored. Sources are saying.
I think the Miami Heat still have one of the best coaches in the league. Obviously, no coaching change. Spoelstra is still there. Kyle Lowry is a winner. I mean, he's a few years ago wins a championship in Toronto with Kawhi Leonard. They bring in PJ Tucker, Markieff Morris, two notable forwards who play tough, who can knock down outside shots at a limited rate, but they both can. And, the guys they lost are guys you kind of expected them to lose. Trevor Ariza, didn't think he would be there for the long term. Goran Dragic, he played a pivotal role for them for, the last 3-4 years. But Kyle Lowry coming in, it made sense that he left. Andre Iguodala, no surprise. Kendrick Nunn, same thing. Not really surprised with Lowry coming in. So I think they're set up for it, and I think we have them rated appropriately. I mean, 4 to 6 seed, could make some noise in the playoffs. They looked really bad in the playoffs last year, but hopefully improvements from Bam. I think Jimmy and Kyle Lowry are going to play great together, but they got to get it done now, and they're going to have a hard test against the Milwaukee Bucks or Brooklyn Nets if they do make it that far.
Kyle Lowry is like, he just seems like he should have been a Miami Heat lifer, right? Like he looks like perfect. Like there was that picture yesterday of him and Bam and Jimmy, and it looks so right that Kyle Lowry is with those guys. It just
I thought the same thing. I looked at the picture and I was like, oh yeah, these guys have been teammates for years now.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like it just seems like it was meant to be. Yeah.
Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry are gonna be like at the gym at like 3 a.m. every day. Like they're gonna try to alpha each other and just get there earlier and earlier, and eventually they're just never gonna leave. They're just gonna start living in their like
Kyle Lowry is gonna make his own coffee brand just to compete with Jimmy now.
Shit, bro. We're still waiting. I'm waiting for Jimmy's coffee. We need that sponsor up in the corner here. His Big Face Coffee Company. But so I think we're in agreement on the Heat. Like we can see it, but a lot of things have to go right for them to do it. We're just not sure. Like, and I guess that's going against what I was saying earlier about projecting. So I'm saying like I trust the younger guys than the older guys, but listen, Jimmy's that's what he does is proves everybody wrong. So we'll see about them. They deserve to be in that category. So let's get into we'll get into our rapid fire here. And Knicks, I feel like Knicks fans listening here are going to be mad that we put them in this category, but I don't know, between me and you, I didn't trust the Knicks to put them in the close to a contender category. We kind of saw them get worked in the series, and their best player is Julius Randle. I don't think he matches up to the teams that we talked about before. So they're in this one with this group of teams. I think all fits into this category. Maybe if everything really, really, really goes right and they reach their maximum potential, can make a conference finals. The Raptors, the Knicks, the Bulls, who I think we definitely both want to touch on here because they're one of the most interesting teams in the East, and the Pacers, who are getting a lot of people back. But I really want to start with the Knicks because I feel like Knicks fans are not going to be happy hearing that they're in this group and not on their own after last year. But I think we just need to temper the expectations a little bit here in New York.
Yeah, I mean, depending on what happens in Philly, I think it would be fair. Obviously, we don't know. That's why we kind of tried not to rate them, but just judging off last year and then them still having Embiid because we don't anticipate Embiid going anywhere. That's why they fall into the so close to contender. I think depending on what happens with Philly, we could replace the Knicks with Philadelphia.
Yeah.
To me, I wouldn't be mad if we had Philly in this segment, Knicks in the last. I think they'll definitely be better than last year. I mean, they brought in two great scorers, both from the Celtics, which stings a little bit, but Kemba Walker and Evan Fournier, who Fournier, when he got to the Celtics, actually said his favorite teammate was Kemba. He loved playing with them. The limited practice time they got together because Kemba was not really practicing because of his knee. Evan Fournier got COVID or was exposed to COVID as soon as he got to Boston. So, I mean, they had limited time together, but I remember he was very outspoken about playing with Kemba and working with him. So those two dynamic scores are, adding to what they already have in Julius Randle, RJ Barrett, Mitchell Robinson, who we didn't really get to see a lot of. And you were very high on Mitchell Robinson last year, so that was a shame they lost their shot blocking center due to injury last season. I definitely think they have a chance to be better than last year, but I mean, I also, if we fast forward to the playoffs, I wouldn't be surprised if I see this team lose to the Atlanta Hawks like they did last year.
Yeah, I just don't see them having as high of a ceiling, I guess, as the teams we talked about earlier. I do like the additions of Kemba and Fournier. I still don't trust Kemba to be healthy a full year. I mean, that's what scares me. So, like, how much is he really like? But getting Derrick Rose back was huge because I figured he would be gone, and I think that guy still has a lot of left in the tank and is going to be effective for them. But I just don't feel as highly about their top end players in Barrett and Randle as I do, I think, of these other teams in the East, and that's where it comes down to it. Randle's deficiencies were kind of shown and exposed in that playoff series when you're playing the team the whole time.
Against Atlanta.
He had a really bad series.
He looked really bad.
And so, like, it was not an anomaly year, but it was easily his best season he's ever had last year.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's kind of like comparing to like football this year. I've heard these conversations all year, and you have by proxy with Trainwreck here about Josh Allen, and is he going to do the same things over this same year? I feel like it's like the same thing. Like, this guy been in the league a couple years, has just this crazy MVP level type season. Like, it's safe to consider, like, is that what we're going to see again? Like, or we only have this single body of work to show you that it's going to happen. So,
and the season was so good that it's hard to replicate it.
Exactly. Like, is he going to be an MVP candidate all the time? Like, I don't know. Like,
yeah, you mentioned like Josh Allen's a good football comparison, but also, like, I feel like the conversation league wide you hear this about is Justin Jefferson and his rookie season and how he broke all these rookie records.
Everybody's like, oh, he can't get better than that.
Yeah, and it's hard to at least repeat it the following year. And so I think it's easy to say that I think I can confidently say that Julius Randle will not be as efficient as he was last year. And the biggest reason is the two guys we started talking about when we brought up the New York Knicks, Fournier and Kemba Walker. Those guys account for a lot of shots. Randle was able to be so good and such a scoring machine and offensive powerhouse for part of the season last year is because there wasn't really many shots being taken away from him. I mean, he could essentially do what he wanted. RJ Barrett doesn't really have the reins of this New York Knicks team. I think some Knicks fans would have hoped that he'd be a little more explosive by now, but that's just not the case. And Randle kind of took matters into his own hands for a lot of the season last year, and he's just going to lose a lot of the touches and shots that he had. So I don't think anyone saying that he's going to have a down year from last year. It's not a knock on him, but it's kind of just a reality at this point.
That's true. So let's get into some of these other teams, and I want to get down to who we think really could be a contender out of this. So the team that we talked about, we knew we would both be interested really talking about here is the Chicago Bulls. And I think they're one of the most interesting team in the league this year, just because of the additions they made. And we want to see how these guys kind of are going to fit together. They had the biggest free agency spree by far. They acquire DeMar DeRozan. They acquire Lonzo Ball. They get Derrick Jones Jr. in there. They get Michael Jordan 2.0, Alex Caruso. Bring Stanley Johnson in, Tony Bradley. So they've filled out this team, traded Lauri Markkanen to the Cleveland Cavaliers. So he's off the roster. Satoransky's gone. Thaddeus Young on the Spurs in that trade for DeRozan. Daniel Tice gone. Thad Young gone. So this is going to be a lot of this. We could kind of just talk about Patrick Williams, and that might decide how good this team is, because he's really going to have to be their anchor this year. But they have Nikola Vucevic, Zach LaVine. They had them on their roster last year. They add Lonzo Ball and DeMar DeRozan alongside them. They've got a solid bench with what they bring in with Caruso. And they've got Patrick Williams will slide into that starting spot next to Vooch and be a defensive powerhouse there. The bench is, I guess, kind of what worries me. Like, Caruso is the best player on the bench. They got Ayo from Illinois there. Maybe that's what will hurt them, but you've got to be just intrigued by the starting lineup and the potential that they have, right? Like, so are you high on the Bulls? Like, do you put them with that category with the Knicks and closer to the Heat, or are you not as bullish coming into the season?
Oh, it's bullish. Nice pun.
Yeah. Oh.
I don't know. They're honestly as excited as I am for Chicago fans and this team, because I actually really like a lot of the players on this team. I'm really intrigued by their starting five. I've always been a DeRozan believer. I think he got treated poorly in that whole Toronto ordeal. I mean, obviously, you bring in Kawhi, Toronto wins a championship. You really can't knock them for the move, but it did suck for him. I think it took a little bit of a toll on his career. He went to San Antonio, and there was never really any help there with him. I mean, the years he was in San Antonio, even though he was with one of the greatest coaches ever, they were never a contender. I mean, they were never really competing at a high level. And now I think he's on a team where he's going to be back to that. And you mentioned Caruso on the bench. I think Colby White and Caruso are two solid guards to have coming off the bench. Colby White's been pretty impressive since he's been in the league, and now he doesn't really have to have too much pressure on him with Lonzo and LaVine both playing above him. It's going to be hard to gauge, because while it is interesting, how diverse their starting lineup is, it's also going to be weird to see them all play together. I mean, you think about DeRozan, LaVine, and Vucevic. Those are all guys who typically shoot the ball a lot, are pretty offensive focused players. It's just going to be interesting to see how it works. And then I love how they bring in Lonzo Ball to the mix, who can pass the ball and really get the rock to anyone at any time, and then is also a pretty exceptional defender. So yeah, I think it's hard to judge the Bulls right now. Kind of similar to the Sixers, but obviously a very different situation. It's just I want to see a little bit of it, but I think we have them rated properly right now. Like, am I shocked if they go to the Eastern Conference Finals? No, because they have talent, but yes, because again, the Eastern Conference is just going to be really good this year. So I think having them in this group of teams is fair. They might just be the best team that we're talking about in this little group between Raptors, Knicks, Pacers, Bulls.
So who are between the other two teams then? Who are you higher on, the Raptors or the Pacers?
Pacers. Yeah,
I feel like they've got the better talent now, just between
Me too.
what we've lost from the Raptors, right?
That's what I don't agree with or like really any of the moves that Toronto's made like the last two seasons.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not high on it either. It's a lot of faith in Pascal Siakam, and I don't think that it's warranted faith unless they're the team that's the Ben Simmons trade. Then they're a lot more interesting. And if they can keep Fred VanVleet and OG Anunoby in that trade somehow, and it's a Pascal focused trade. Because if you put OG with VanVleet and Simmons, I think there's a lot more of a dimension to it. And you know how much I love OG Anunoby, but I don't think he's on the level of some of the guys. Again, that's kind of how we've determined this list, but that's how these teams have worked out. And the duos on this Raptors team that they can get to, the heights that they can get to, like their ceiling just isn't as high. with the talent that they have on their roster, even compared to the Knicks and Bulls. I feel like now we've kind of talked through it. Like the Knicks and Bulls are like their own like separate sub tier here, where we
Yeah.
think that those two teams definitely have a higher ceiling than the Raptors and the Pacers. But the Pacers, the infrastructure again, and Rick Carlisle is a great coach. Like Rick Carlisle has proven that he can coach up any team. He did a great job with the Mavs. It was time for a change there, and and I wonder what maybe he has a great positive impact on a team that couldn't catch a break last year.
Yeah. So I think you're completely right about like why we have the Raptors or the Pacers in our eyes just probably a little better than the Raptors. I think it is purely talent wise, but this Pacers team, I think it's fair to have them in this tier because kind of like the Bulls, it's going to be interesting. Like I just want to see it, but in a different way because they really didn't do much at all this offseason, but they have guys returning from injury because they were banged up a lot last season, most notably Karis LeVert, who kind of had some scary health ailments going on and now will be returning back to the court, hopefully at full strength. And then, obviously they have Turner, Sabonis, Brogdon, who's a great player. The Pacers are the Pacers. I think they're just going to be another tough team this season and probably play teams really hard. And as you mentioned, now they have a great head coach and a very smart basketball mind in Rick Carlisle. So, yeah, I think Pacers have a slight edge if we're talking Raptors Pacers.
I agree. I agree with that. So as we wrap up here, last thing that we'll get into with the East, which team has the best chance to make a playoff run? The bottom 5 of the East, the Washington Wizards, but losing a Russell Westbrook, so you have Bradley Beal and a Spencer Dinwiddie signing there. But we know what to get with that team. Beal is going to be great, but they're going to be definitely battling in this play-in spot. The Cleveland Cavaliers brought in Evan Mobley, Ricky Rubio, Colin Sexton. I don't think he's getting moved. He didn't get an extension yet, but hasn't been any talks on that front. I think they're going to go into the season with that core. So we'll see what happens there. Detroit picking Cade Cunningham, but still very young and probably not ready to make this jump yet. Orlando, same thing, Jalen Suggs. And then Charlotte, who was damn close to the playoffs last year, obviously. LaMelo, hopefully healthy this whole entire season. So who are you the most excited about of this group, and who do you think can actually make a playoff run ahead of the other and knock out one of the other 10 teams that we talked about already?
Yeah, I'm sorry that it's not the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Nah, okay.
Although I am excited about them, and I think they would probably be my second choice, honestly, out of these teams. But my first is the Charlotte Hornets. Yeah. I think just they were really impressive, man. I thought they kind of collapsed almost at the end of last year. I thought, judging, midway through the season, looking at these guys and the performances they were putting in night out, I was like, wow, these dudes are scary. Obviously, you had LaMelo Ball out for an extended period of time, so that never helps you. But starting with LaMelo, I mean, year 2 for LaMelo, the sky's the limit, dude. Like, I think we're going to see – we already saw some flashes of superstar talent. It should only – we're talking about Tatum and Brown, guys who improve every season. I think LaMelo Ball is going to be like that for the next, 5 years and maybe even longer. He's just such a smart basketball mind. He has the length. He has the athleticism. He's been playing with his brothers who both play professionally his entire life. It's just a basketball family he comes from, and he already proved that he's a pro's pro. They have guys like Terry Rozier, Gordon Hayward, Miles Bridges. They just have a real young, explosive group. I mean, Hayward's not young, but the rest of the guys on this team are. Yeah. They did lose guys like Monk and Devontae Graham, who I thought were big pieces to this team last year. But, then the flip side of that is they bring in a Kelly Oubre Jr., who I actually think Kelly Oubre is a really good player, and good teams want a Kelly Oubre, a guy who plays tough defense, a guy who can just, elevate and slam the ball really whenever he wants. Ish Smith, I think, is a huge replacement for guys like Malik Monk and Devontae Graham, just because he's that small scoring point guard who's really the opposite of LaMelo Ball. So it's a nice change of pace. And then James Bouknight fell to them in this
That's
year's
true.
NBA draft.
Bouknight's gonna ball out, bro.
And they got guys like Scotty Lewis and Kai Jones in the draft too. I think the Hornets really made a lot of improvements across the board. So, I think out of this group, if there's one team, I think it has to be Charlotte for me.
Yeah, I think Charlotte is the obvious choice here. I think they could definitely be up in the upper category, but Eastern Conference Finals is kind of like, no, that team's not ready for that yet. And that's why I think the Pacers and Raptors, we have them ahead of them because we've just seen like the pedigree. Even though the Raptors might be the most overrated team in the NBA when people discuss this too, because they also had Kawhi Leonard, and he's pretty decent at basketball. So, and the Hornets are for every reason you said, like, are the most qualified here. They could be on a team on the rise again. I do think that Washington is still going to be very good even without Russell Westbrook. I think Spencer Dinwiddie's a great player, but I just don't trust their young core. Honestly, I don't trust their young core as much as a Cleveland young core. Just from the talent that Cleveland has kind of accumulated there with Garland. Like, everybody's high on Darius Garland. Steph Curry the other day in an interview said that Darius Garland is one of his favorite up and coming players right now. And there's just a lot of NBA guys that see a lot in Garland. And I think that it started clicking a little bit last year. Him and Sexton are obviously undersized, and that's why they have 17 centers on the roster besides those two. Okoro had a great year as a rookie last year, showed some great flashes defensively and athletically. Evan Mobley is interesting, obviously, to see what we get from that. We know how good Jared Allen is. I just trust that core more than like Rui Hachimura. Rui Hachimura actually stepped away for mental health reasons. He's not even with the Wizards right now. So it's really just Bradley Beal and kind of the same crew we've been seeing.
Kyle Kuzma.
Yeah, Kuz in the trade for Russ. I think Kuz is gonna have some hilarious stat lines this year, bro. Like, Kuz is gonna have like 2 of 17 games and shit like that. 100%.
Yeah, he's gonna have Shaq in a full moments, but then I feel like there's probably also games where he's gonna have like 38, like 10 and 5 too. Just out of nowhere.
Oh man. It's gonna be the Kuz experience outside of LA is gonna be great. But I just don't. I think the Wizards are clearly behind the Hornets, the team that they ended up passing last year in the playoffs, or for that last play-in spot. And they're more with the Cleveland range. And I think Detroit and Orlando. Do you have much to say about those? I think both those two teams are going to be the 2 worst teams in the league again, or at least very close to it.
Yeah, I think as far as like just looking outside in right now, I think Detroit's doing all the right things. I just don't think they have enough, talent that's ready to compete right now. They stole Luka Garza, in my opinion, very late in this draft.
Yeah.
They already signed him to, I believe, an extension past his rookie deal. And that's a steal. They had the number 1 pick. They drafted Cade Cunningham, as we know. They had a few talented rookies from last year, including Sadiq Bey. I just think they're doing the right things. I can't really say the same for Orlando. I just think they have a lot of talent at the same positions. I obviously love the Suggs pick. But I don't know. I think they're too young, don't really have an identity, weren't good last year, don't have Aaron Gordon, Vucevic, or Fournier anymore. So, yeah, I mean, Detroit and Orlando are what they are until we see some big improvements from their talented young guys.
Agreed. All right. Well, that'll do it for tonight's episode of Happy Hour Hoops. With our Eastern Conference preview. We'll be back next week. Western Conference. The West is a little more wild. A little bit more wild.
Wild West.
The East. Exactly. So follow us at Happy Hour Hoops 1. Subscribe to Happy Hour Hoops on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Give us 5 stars, and we'll be back next week with the Western Conference preview. Have a great night, folks.
Later, guys.